Hungarian Folk Tales. The Water Fairy. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a miller, and the miller had a wife. They had a fine big mill, and they earned their keep and passed their days. There was just one thing that caused them grief, and that was they had no child. And they grew poorer and poorer every day until they had nothing at all. The poor man lamented night and day that a curse had been laid upon them. Off he went one evening and sat by the mill pond. There he wept. All at once he heard a voice. "Listen, poor man, I'll help you in your troubles. I'll make you richer by far than ever before. All you have to do is give me the living creature that you have not got at home." So the poor man thought to himself, "What is it that I haven't got at home? Perhaps a dog? Perhaps a cat? What could it be? Right you are, I agree." The poor man cheered up and set off for home. He was still on his way when his servant came running towards him. "Quickly, Master Miller, the mistress has just given birth to a fine, healthy boy." Well now, the miller ran all the way back to the mill pond. Come here, you evil spirit, you have taken my child." But no one appeared. Home he went and told what had happened. They threw their arms around each other and wept and wept. What was going to become of their child? When would that voice take him away, raise the boy as the light of their lives? They never ever let him near the mill pond. And when he grew older, they told him that he was not to go there because the water fairy would carry him away. And the boy never went there. He avoided the place altogether. Now they became wealthier than anyone in the village before or since. Where they laid down a florin, the next day there were two. Time and tide went by, and they sent their son to a master woodman so that he would be a forester. So taken was the master with the lad, so quick and clever he was, that the master gave him his own daughter in marriage. The young man went all through the forest hunting. One day, he saw a fine stag. He aimed at the stag, but the stag vanished, clean out of sight. Off he went again on the following day, and once again the stag was enticing the young man, and so it went on for 3 or 4 days. His wife spoke to him. "Where is it you go every day, neither eating or drinking, only concerned for your forest? But don't go near the mill pond, just so that no trouble will befall you." "I never go that way, my dear. I only go hunting in the forest." Once again he set off, tracked the stag, and brought him down. He thought of skinning it, but in skinning it, he got covered in blood, so he decided to go to the river and wash himself. There he set down his cap and his satchel. But once he put his 2 hands into the water, 2 mighty arms rose out of the water, fastened themselves around his neck, and dragged him in and under. His good wife was waiting for him at home. She ran to the forest to the mill pond, and there she saw his cap and his satchel. "Dear God in heaven, what my father-in-law warned about has happened." Up and down the edge of the waters she raced. "Give me back my good husband, water fairy." But the water was silent. She ran and ran until tiredness overcame her, and she lay down and fell asleep. In her dream she saw, not far away, a shack in which there lived an old woman who knew many, many secrets. She awoke, and just as in her dream, off she went to the shack. She knocked at the door and spoke of her problem in floods of tears. There, my dear," said the old woman. "When the moon is full, off you go to the place and sit at the edge of the waters. I'll give you a brush, and with it you must brush your hair." So the young wife waited until the moon became full. She went to the edge of the waters, let loose her hair, and began to brush it. And then, all of a sudden, Her husband stuck his head out of the water, but he said not a word, and then he vanished again to the watery depths. She went home and told the old woman what had happened. The old woman said, "Tomorrow evening you must bring a spinning wheel with you, and there you must spin." And so she did. She brought a spinning wheel, sat there at the spot, and began to spin. And when she span, once again the water frothed, and her husband appeared up to his waist. But again they were not able to exchange a word between themselves. "Off you go, dear girl. This is the third night. On this flute you should play a sweet, sad tune. Then you'll see what happens." And so it was. The young wife sat there on the same spot and played. At first the water started to froth, and in she jumped and embraced her husband. But then such a storm blew up that her husband was carried off to one shore and the wife to the other. They were thrown so far apart that she stayed on one and he stayed on the other. Then the man took work as a swineherd and the woman as a cook. The swineherd brought the pigs out to feed every day, and the woman brought food at midday to her master in the meadows. When she brought the food to the master, she saw that there was a swineherd off in the distance. So she walked towards him, and they began to speak. And as they spoke, the young woman asked the man where he had come from, and the man began to tell her of how he had been born, and how the water fairy had carried him away, and how he'd been parted from his darling wife. And as he told all these things to his own wife, her eyes opened once again, and she saw that he was her husband. Then they embraced and kissed each other sweetly and went home. They had many, many children, and they all lived happily ever after. This is the end of my tale. Hungarian Folk Tales. How I Passed My Childhood. Now, when I was born and all of 6 weeks old, out I went into the street on a hot summer's day, and I met a true old friend of mine, who was a bottle ahead of me and tipsy with it. So we made a pair of oxen out of mud, a cart and sacks to load onto the cart to take them off to the mill and grind them. And off we went. Now in those days there was a water mill to do the milling, but it wasn't there. The miller was strolling up and down on the water, and so we asked him to call up the mill, and he waved for it and shouted until up it came and we could start to mill away. Now the miller man didn't have a scoop, so he pulled off my head and used that as a scoop. So when we were finished and off I went on my way home, who did I meet but a shower of women and young ones who started to laugh at me. "What are you laughing at?" says I. "Ah, you don't have a head," says they. And that's how I knew I'd left my head behind in the mill. Back I went, put the head onto my neck, and off for home again. But the women and the young ones were laughing at me again. "Now what are you laughing at?" says I. "Isn't your nose at the back of your head?" says they. So I gave my head a good twist to set it right and off for home again. Now that's when I remembered that I'd stuck my whip into the ground behind the mill pond. Back I went, but when I got there, what did I see but that a great big tree had shot up from it and my old whip was up at the top. So up and up I climbed, and there at the top, what did I find but a hawk chasing a whole cloud of little birds, trying to catch them any way at all. Straight away the little birds, one and all, flew right up my sleeves, into my shirt, and right up my legs, into my breeches. Quick as a flash, I tied up my sleeves and breeches, and wasn't I happy that I'd caught so many birds? Yes, indeed. And all these birds in my shirt and breeches started off chirping and tweeting, and all of them giving off in their own language, until up they flew with me and carried me off far, far away. I saw the women washing and scrubbing down on the edge of the sea. They looked up and shouted out, "Look at that big bird!" But I thought I heard them say, "Loosen your shirt!" So that's what I did, and out flew the birds, and down I plopped into the sea. I made such a big splash that I emptied out all the water, and the fishes were all left around me. So I gathered up a fine lot of them. I didn't waste any more time there because I was far from home. So I set off back through Hotland. Now Hotland is a strange country indeed, where they don't build their houses on the ground, but up in the air at the height of a man. So they need ladders to get in. The people in Hotland are all big and tall, and everything is big. Even the church was so big that there were 4 soldiers in there on a horseback, and when the priest chanted, "The Lord be with you," one of the soldiers spurred his horse and off he went, and he intoned it to the second soldier to the third to the fourth, and he sang it to the respondent. So long was the Mass that the congregation could have done with a good breakfast, but that was no problem at all, since the altar was made of ham and the candles were sausages. And just as big and tall was the steeple of the church. When 2 carpenters were building it, they dropped their hatchets, and by the time one of them fell to the earth, it had rotted away. And when the second was in the air, a lark nested in it, and before it reached the ground, it had laid its eggs and raised its chicks. The bell was so large, the only way they could get it into the belfry was to carry it up when it was a baby and let it grow up there. It was hotter than hot there, so hot that all they did was slaughter a pig, put it in a pan, and put the pan out of the window, and straight away they had roast pork. But I didn't waste too much time there either. I'd had enough and continued on my way home. That's how I got to Coldland. It was so cold there that the white of an egg would freeze so brightly that you could read a newspaper by its light. You couldn't speak there unless you could read, because when a man said a word, it straight away froze in front of him and the other had to read it. But I didn't waste too much time in Coldland. On I went, on my way home. By the end, I was getting so fed up with the journey that I stuck my whip into the earth and climbed up to the heavens. And there was my grandmother. "The best of the day to you, Grandma. Do you have some bread and jam for me?" "Oh, dear son," says she, "up here we don't really eat." "You don't? Then how do I get down from here quickly?" Then an old man arrived, and I told him as well that I wanted to get back down because there was no bread and jam to be had here at all. The old man remembered that they had a chest of bran, and we twisted a rope out of that. I could lower myself down. And as true as I'm here, we plaited it fine enough, but a mouse somehow got into it, and when I was lowering myself back down, that little mouse bit right through the rope, and I plopped down into the ground. I thought I was in the old town somewhere near the church, but I wasn't. I was at the edge of the new town, and I was well and truly drilled into the earth, so I shouted out for them to dig me out, but no one came. So I had to go home for a spade and dig myself out. And that's all I remember of my own younger days and how I passed them. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Little Swineheard. Once upon a time, over oceans deep and mountains high, there lived a poor woman who had a son, and his job was to look after the pigs. No matter what his mother tried to get him to do, it was always the same. There was nothing he could do right or proper, not even if you turned him into an angel. He was good for nothing at all. So anyway, this good-for-nothing of a little swineherd heard that the king would give his daughter's hand to anyone who could hide away so well that she couldn't find him. "Now then, swineherd, my lad," he said to himself, "roll your sleeves up, for there's a lot to win if you go about it the right way." So he gathered everything up, baked himself a satchel of scones, put on his heavy cape, and off he went. He walked and he walked through bushes and trees, over hill and dale, and still he couldn't find the castle of the king. For a long week he walked, ate the last of his scones, and still he didn't see a thing. And then he became so thirsty that his tongue hung out like a slipper out of a dog's mouth. Then as he went along, he came upon a well, and on it perched 2 white doves. "Well then, the pair of you, I'll have to eat you both because I'm very hungry indeed." "Oh, don't eat us, little swineherd. Draw us some water. We're so thirsty, and one good deed deserves another." And they begged him and begged him not to make a meal of them. So he went and drew up a bucket of water for them, and he himself drank his fill of the cold, sweet water. And so he continued on. But now he was so hungry that his stomach rattled like a dog on a chain. Then he came across a lame fox. "Well then, lame fox, I'll have to eat you, I'm so hungry." The lame fox beseeched him not to make a meal of him. "One good deed deserves another, little swineherd. I'll be able to help you." The swineherd's eyes were popping out of his head with hunger, but he decided not to eat the lame fox. He staggered on, and staggered to the right, and staggered to the left, and thought he'd never come to his journey's end. Then, far off, he saw a great lake. Down he went to its shore and saw a little fish struggling at the water's edge. Quick as a flash, he tickled it out of the water. "Oh, please don't eat me, little swineherd. I'll repay you for your good deed." The little swineherd looked at the fish, and beautiful it was too, its scales all shiny and gold. He felt sorry for the fish and put it back into the water. On he went and eventually came upon another well, and on it perched 2 other white doves. "Do you think I'm a madman? As sure as the sky above me, I'm going to make a meal of you both." So he tried to catch hold of the doves, but they begged and beseeched him not to do them harm. And the end of it was that he did them no injury, but drew them water, drank a great bellyful himself, and went on his way. Not long after that, he found himself at the castle, and at the gate stood the king. "So what brings you to this far-off land?" said the king. So the little swineherd told his tale and why he had come, that he had heard that the king would give his daughter's hand to someone who could hide away so well that she couldn't find him. And that's what he wanted to try. "Fair enough, my lad," said the king, "but have you seen the 99 heads up there? Yours will be the 100th if you can't hide yourself well." The little swineherd looked around and turned to the king and bravely said, "I'll do the best I can, your highness." On the following morning, the king came to him and told him to hide himself away before his daughter arose. The little swineherd made himself ready, and what did he see but the 2 white doves? "Come on, we'll take you away." And the 2 white doves carried him off to hide him behind the sun. The princess prepared herself for the day. She went down to the garden, plucked the finest of the roses and twirled around. "Out you come, little swineherd. There you are, behind the sun." And the little swineherd was furious and frightened. What could he do? Out he came from the far side of the sun. The next day dawned bright and clear. The little swineherd rose, looked out of the window, and there he saw the lame fox rearing up, waiting to take him away to the end of the world. The princess went down to the garden, plucked the finest of the roses, and twirled around. Out you come, little swineherd, come back from the end of the world. And the little swineherd was forced to reappear. On the third day he went off to meet the little fish at the lake, and the fish took him deep, deep down into the water. Not a living soul comes here, they'll never find me here. But the princess went down to the garden, plucked the finest of the roses, twirled around once, and called the little swineherd from out of the bottom of the lake. That's surely the end of me. My head will be on the 100th stake, said the little swineherd. He laid himself down to go to sleep, but all he did was toss and turn, writhe and wriggle. On the following day at dawn, he saw 2 white doves at the window. One of them flew off instantly, but the other one stayed. Come as quick as you can. You'll be turned into a fine rose, and so will I. And that's what happened. By mid-morning, all the buds had blossomed in the garden. Down came the princess. She looked for the finest of the roses and found 2 of the same beauty. She plucked both of them and fastened them to her dress. Then she twirled around once, but she didn't see the little swineherd. She twirled around twice, and still she didn't see him. Father, I can't see the little swineherd. He's hidden himself away so that I can't catch him. He can't have. Just twirl around once more. So she twirled around once more for the 3rd time, but she could have twirled around till day was done, and still she wouldn't have caught the little swineherd. Then one of the roses on her dress turned into a dove, and the other into the little swineherd. My heart's delight, my only love, I will be yours and you will be mine. Nothing in this world will part as ever. And they embraced and kissed and clung together like a bunch of flowers. Soon there was a wedding feast, and everyone was invited. And the swineherd king and his beautiful queen lived happily ever after.